What's going on, everybody? Joshua Tree here, back with another video. In today's video, I have been called to share with you guys on a more personal note, a more vulnerable note of the passing of my mother. How did I process this whole experience? How did I work through my grieving? And early in meditation today, I've been called to share this part of my journey with you guys. So, for people who are tuned in into this video, I hope that this message helps you in any capacity. Um, and I hope that whatever that you are experiencing, this helps alleviate a little bit of the pain and a little bit of what you are currently going through. Okay. So, in order for me to give you guys a little bit of what I've learned through this whole experience and wisdom behind it, I'm going to have to share a story, right? I'm going to have to share you my story of how my mother transitioned and everything that I went through during this experience to support me. All of the things that I thought was, healing or whatever, like I'm going to just pour it all out. And like I said, hopefully it helps one person on this video. So let's get straight into it, you guys. So I'm going to definitely try my best to remember the timelines. So just bear with me. And I'm going to try my best to get through this story. All right. So I'm definitely going to be going back into these experiences, right? So let's get it started. All right. So let's go back to 2015, 2016. So around 2015, 2016, around this time, I was working offshore in the oil industry. And this was around a time where the oil industry was plummeting. So they was getting rid of people, right? And I was one of the people they got rid of. So around say 2015, 16, or even prior to, maybe a few years prior, my mother was diagnosed with cancer. My mother had multiple myeloma, which is a blood disease, a blood cancer. Now, also around this time, I was very, very deep into holistic healing, which I still am to today. But specifically, I was juicing every day. I was eating a lot of raw foods. I was deep into a lot of like holistic practitioners, people like Minister Inky, KT Arch Degree, Dr. Sabi, a lot of people, Chef Aki. There was a lot of people, Dick Gregory, a lot of people I was invested into in terms of their teachings, Dr. Africa. Um, and, listening to a lot of what they shared about how to heal the body, I was deeply ingrained into these type of philosophies. So around 2015, 2016, my job that I was with for almost 6 years, they let me go. And the reason why they let me go is because of some bullshit reason of my hair was considered a safety hazard. I've been having my hair for almost 20 some years, and they hired me with my hair the way it was, but for some reason around this time they were trying to find reasons to get rid of people, and so they said that my locks was a safety hazard. It couldn't fit in the helmet, the safety helmet, and they just viewed it as a safety hazard. So they wound up letting me go because of that, which was, obviously bullshit. And if I would have had a smarter mindset, I would have definitely, filed for discrimination. But neither here or there. I got laid off from my job around 2016 or so. Okay. So I'm basically free as a bird. I'm able to do whatever I want to do. And also around this time, like I said, my mom also she had cancer. So I was in a space of always trying to make a juice for her, always trying to make a salad, trying to support her and trying to help herself heal, because I carry the mindset that the body can heal itself. You do not need to go to therapy or chemotherapy. You do not need to go to all these doctors and have them sticking all these needles in you and all this radiation. The body can heal itself. So let's fast forward a little bit. So now you guys have a bit of understanding of where things began. Around this time, I was trying my best to find ways to support my mother other than just giving her juices. And so I did some research, heavy research, and I've came across this woman who was a naturopathic doctor. She actually was an MD first, and then she got into naturopathic medicine. I reached out to her, right? And she stayed locally where I stay at. And so I reached out to her and I'm telling her and I'm explaining to her, like, look, my mom has cancer and I know she can get rid of this. Can you help her? And it was a real sweet woman. She reached, she responded back like, yes, I can help your mother, but where is she at right now currently? Like, I don't know where she's at in her treatments. I don't know what experiences has she had since she's been taking chemotherapy. I need to have all this type of information before I can move forward. So I'm like, all right, great. So I go to my mom and I tell my mom, like, look, mom, I found this person who said that they can help you. All they need to know is where you're at in your chemo, and all they need to know is different information, but they can help you. My mom responds is, Josh, I don't know them people. I ain't trying. I ain't trying to go over there and talk to the people. I don't know. So I'm like having this dialogue with my mom. Like, mom, look, I'm telling you, like, you do not have to go through chemotherapy. You do not have to sit up there and subject your body to experimentation of them trying to help you. Like, you can heal the body through various other ways. And my mom kind of knew about a lot of that, but she just was so stuck and so ingrained in her habits, right? The food that she ate, the environment itself, the emotional comfort that food provides. She just was not trying to shift into that type of mindset. So I always felt like, living in a household that, okay, well, I'm going to be the healthy person that's going to always be the advocate for her to always eat healthy, right? But she wasn't trying to hear it, you know what I'm saying? And so, uh, fast forward, me still continue to, provide juices because she did wanted to drink juice. So I was like always trying to make a fresh juice for her and trying to find like different recipes that can help her with her blood, like, burdock root and all these different type of things. And so now we're in 2017. This is around the time where you guys saw my last video, not my last video, but the video I talked about my story of how I went through a traumatic heartbreak. This is around this time. So now I'm going through experience of a traumatic heartbreak. Okay. So my focus on helping my mom has shifted because now, pimp in distress, right? I'm in distress. Okay. I am down and out and I am willing to take my life because I felt so goddamn suicidal. If you guys haven't watched my video on that, please watch it because I think it's very helpful for people who also have experienced some type of trauma through a relationship. And so 2017, I'm going through this experience, right? And throughout that experience, I went through what I went through. I'm not going to go deep into that, but I was able to get through that experience, okay? And so now at this point, by me going through that whole experience, my mom is still going through her experiences where, she did eventually, let's say, go into remission. You know, the hospital was able to do something with the chemotherapy and she was able to shrink the cancer or what have you. She was in remission for a few years, for a couple of years, I want to say. I want to say I want to say around 2000. I really don't know, but I know she was in remission for a short period. Let me just say that. But it came back, okay? And so in 2018, I want to say is when the cancer came back or something like that. Or like late 2017 the cancer came back. Um and so okay, yeah, cuz I'm trying to get my I'm trying to get my timelines right, but let's just say that's when around it happened. This is also around the time I also didn't have a job. So I'm also trying to find another job. And so I wound up getting to driving, got into truck transportation, started driving 18 wheelers. I went to school to learn how to drive 18 wheelers. So around 2018, this is also where I'm growing more spiritually. I'm starting to learn various things, such as the occult sciences and things like that. And around 2018, while I was in truck driving school, This is where my mother was going through a lot of difficulty in terms of her cancer. So this is where I felt a strong need to try to support my mama no matter whatever happens. So I remember the woman that I talked to, who was a naturopathic doctor, I reached out to her again. I said, look, my mom is really going through it. She really needs the help. She really needs the support. She tells me, Josh, I'm going to let you know right now. I know you mean well. I know this is your mother. But if she's not willing to partake or to participate in her own healing, I can't help her. And around the time, I didn't know what she meant. I was like, what are you talking about? She has a problem. You know how to help her. What are you talking about? I really was like perplexed. I didn't know what she was talking about. Now, granted, around this time, I was also taking certifications on holistic healing and wellness. So I was trying to understand from her perspective of what I learned, and it just, but it wasn't making sense. Fast forward, my mother is now in the ICU. She's in the ICU, and at this point, I'm up with her. I'm in the hospital with her. You know, my family members, everyone had jobs and stuff like that. I'm with her every day, every step of the way. Doctors coming in there, asking her questions, trying to peep out her health conditions. I'm asking every person that came in the room, well, what does that mean? Well, what does that mean? Well, why you think she should do that? Do you think it's more dealing with this? I think it has something to do with this because I was doing research. So I was always asking the nurses, the specialists, whoever they brought in, why you think that should be the next procedure. Why you think she should do this? I didn't give a fuck who it was. I want to know if they knew what they was talking about, and I want to make sure my mom was in the best hands. And so, things progressed to where she eventually got into the ICU. At this point, I'm frustrated. I'm angry. I'm mad because I have the mindset that, mom, if you would have just listened to what I told you to do, if you would have just, try your best to eat something or more healthier, or anything like that. I got some little snot coming down my nose. Give me a minute there. Hold up. Okay. If you would have just did what I told you to did, you would not have been in this position. So I was mad. I was angry. I was frustrated. And I remember when she was in the ICU, I called one of my friends and I act and I'm confined to them and I'm just sharing my frustration with them. And also I'm a little bit scared because she's in the ICU and I don't know what's going to happen. And my friend at the time, and it still is my friend, she told me that, what do you feel like you're holding on to? And I told her that I really want to help my mom, but it's like I can't. And she said, that might be what it is you need to let go of. You need to accept the fact that you cannot help your mother. At that time, it hit so hard that I started crying. My mother was in the ICU, and so I had took a walk outside of the ICU and around the corner to call my friend. And so when she shared this with me, I was just crying, staring out the window. And it made me realize, like, Josh, you've been putting up this fight of trying to help your mama for so long that you're realizing that you can't help her. Right. And so that whole experience, was a thing. And then so she got out the ICU and she was able to come back home. And this is might have been, like I said, we in the same year, 2018. She got out for maybe a couple of weeks and then she went back into the ICU. Now, for some reason, I felt like this was about to happen. Like I felt like something was about to go down. So I'm back in the ICU and I am with my mother and she's lied up there and she's just, it was an experience. I'm gonna just say that. I don't want to go in detail, but I was there when my mama gave her last breath. I never shared this with no one, so I'm sharing this with you guys. I was there holding my mother's hand when she gave her last breath. And for some reason, I felt like I'm the one that's going to hold the space for my mother. I'm the one that can only hold the space for my mother because of everything that I've experienced and all of the understanding that I had about the transition or about what happens, the trauma behind it. I felt like I was able to hold it. And as my mother transitioned, of course, the family members coming in. And so I'm consoling them and I'm hugging them and I'm trying my best to keep myself intact, right? Later on that night, we drove to my sister's house after we left the hospital, and we all just went to my sister's house and we just basically, went to sleep. But a lot of us went in our rooms and, a lot of us cried. And so for me specifically, I went to the living room and I laid on the ground and I just started crying. And crying made me realize, the reason why I was crying because I was frustrated because I felt like I had a grudge towards my mama because I felt like I was mad at her. When me and my mama was in this house, I started to feel like I had to protect myself because she was going through what she was going through. And I had to find ways to protect myself from not feeling so pulled into her experience because I also was trying to take care of myself. And I felt like if I would have just gave in to her experience, I would have been depressed, I would have been sad, and I would have been non functional. So I had to find a way to protect myself from not being so infused in her world. And that hurt me to do that because this is my mama and I want to support her the best way I can. But I noticed that by me engulfing myself into her experience, it was influencing my ability to do what I had to do for myself. And so I felt like I carried this wall, this boundary towards my mama living in the same household. And so as I'm laying there on the ground crying, that was also what I was crying out. The fact that my mama was going through what she was going through, and this was her last days, and I held a block. I held this protection against her, and I didn't want to do that. And it's like, it's so confusing because I'm like, how do I navigate this? I know I need to do what I need to do, but I also need to take care of her. It's just a very, very complex experience. And so as I'm laying there on the ground, I went to sleep. I woke up like 3, 4 in the morning and I started crying some more. I was like probably the only person up and I'm crying and I'm crying. And I got mad again. I got frustrated and I said, you know what? I'm tired of this shit. I'm tired of trying to understand what this is. What is life really about? Why do we have to go through death? Like, I don't understand this shit. Now, around this time, I was deep into occult sciences. So one of my teachers, Bobby Hemmett, of course, recommended a book. And I can share the book with you guys. He recommended a book to read to help you understand the transition and the death and afterlife. And so I had that book on my Kindle at the time. So while I'm laying on the ground, I just opened up the book as tears coming down my eyes, and I just started reading the book. And immediately I started to feel better because I started to have more of an understanding, a mental understanding of what is going on in this whole transition process and why it's a universal experience to understand how death works. See, I was still carrying the belief that I learned from the church. I was still carrying the belief I learned from religion, which is very vague. People die and they go to heaven and that's it. But we always question like, but why? Like, why did you have to take this person's life for like what is this whole experience of us having a death and like going through a death process? Like, I feel like I didn't have. I feel like I had a. I feel like out of all the things that I've studied, I never fully explored death. I only knew the concept of death through church, religion, the culture, and movies. There was nothing that was substantial. There was nothing that was supportive or conducive to how I felt. So I had to read something. I needed something more than what I had. And so that book definitely supported me extremely. So much so that I was able to get out of this sadness. I was able to, go to my mother's funeral, and I was the one to be at the podium expressing to the people in the audience, the people in the church, like, this is a celebration. We talk about death is not, death is something that is, a negative connotation, but every time I'm in a church home, I see people say death is about celebration, but I also see a lot of people crying. I wanted to be the person that say, this is my mama next to me. And we all know who she is. And I want to celebrate who she was and who she is to everyone else in this room. So I had a different mindset. I was so sure of myself. I had so much certainty just by reading that book. So my mama transitioned in 2018. And so, of course, I didn't feel so much of the grieving at that particular time because, like I said, I read this book. And what that book has done, it made me rationalize my pain. And so this is where I want to share with you guys more of what I've experienced. So 2018 happened and she transitioned. Fast forward, I complete my truck driving school. I start, driving trucks, and I started just kind of living my life. Fast forward to 2023. Now at this point, I've, what I would like to say, have become very adept at understanding my emotions. I meet someone who I was dating at the time, and she was a Reiki healer. And she does a session, we do a session, what have you. And during the Reiki session, she says that my mom has came through, and my mom relayed a message to her. Now, after my mama passed, I put up an altar, and it's actually in the room that I am right now. I'm looking at my altar with her on the altar right now. Um, I put up an altar for her, and so I already know, like, my mama, I know when she coming through. She come through my dreams. She come through the different spiritual animals. Like, I know when my mom is coming through. So for her to say, like, yo, your mom came through during the session, and she had this message, it made me feel emotional to the point where I started crying. And the reason why I started crying, because I remember that I never truly shared my story with people of what happened when my mama passed away. I never told nobody that I was the one in the hospital holding her hand. And for some reason, I needed to share that so I can release it. And so when I was in the Reiki session, that's what I was doing. And so I'm crying profusely, and I'm like tearing up, and I'm just like noticing inside of myself, Josh, you have to say this. Like, my inner healer was telling me, Josh, you have to say this. And the more that I tried to say it, because my throat was clogged from trying to say it, as more as I kept trying to say it, I kept crying and kept crying and kept crying and kept crying. At this particular time, I told myself, okay, like, I'm good now. Like, I thought, right? This is part of the wisdom in this. This is a part of something I want to share with you guys that could potentially help. Is I thought by me rationalizing what the death process is, what the experience of losing someone is, by reading this book, I thought that healed me. I thought that I rose above this whole death experience. In reality, it was like it was like putting a band-aid on, uh you know putting a band-aid putting a band-aid on it, putting a band-aid on a scab, but the scab is not a scab. It's a huge wound that I was trying to aid. And so this was in 2023, right? So at this point, I'm like, okay, I finally released it. I cried it out. And so now I'm thinking to myself, I'm good now. Like, I finally was able to release my grieving. So I say that to say from 2018 to 2023, I've been grieving and didn't even know it. I was grieving inside of my heart and I did not know it. I thought I was good, but I was still holding that pain in my heart since 2018. So let me backtrack to you guys. Let me go back. When I was on that floor crying, that was my moment to process. That was my moment to fully let all the frustrations go, all the anger, but I didn't. What I decided to do was I decided to read a book to help me through my experience. And then during the funeral arrangements and everything that was happening around that process, I kept myself centered and I kept myself strong. I never fully processed my emotions because I felt like I had to hold it down. I felt like I had to be the strong one for everyone else around me. So I never fully processed it. Everyone else around me did, but I didn't. So when I had this experience in 2023, when I had the Reiki, I felt like that was my moment to finally process what I held on to since 2018. Right now, let's fast forward. Now we in 2024. Now this happened actually last year of November when I got deep into inner child work. And this is when I realized I still haven't fully let go of my grieving. As I'm doing my inner child work, I revisited the grief that I experienced when my mama passed away. And when I revisited it, I wanted to see if this was still a truth for me. I wanted to see if grieving was still a trauma that was still stored in my body. And I developed a method and a system to know how to do that. So I'm utilizing my method to engage with the emotion itself to see if it's still stored in my body. And it was still stored in my body. So when I revisit this experience, I was still keeping the grief in my heart. And I want you guys to pay attention to what I'm about to share with you. The reason why I kept the grief stored in my heart is because I thought I was still responsible for her death. I internalized and made it my responsibility and blamed myself for her death. Because at the time, I felt like it was my duty to support my mother and help my mother because I had the knowledge, right? I was the one who was all into this health stuff. I was the one who was doing the research. I was the one who felt like I'm the one that's going to save my mom. That was my mindset. And so when my mama passed, even though I processed a lot what I processed, it was the trauma of how I perceived it. And I perceived it as I'm the one who caused my mama's death because I didn't try hard enough to prevent her from not having this experience. So as I'm reliving the experience in my body and I'm seeing that this is the reason why I haven't fully let go, as I'm crying in my bedroom, I'm yelling at the top of my lungs. I'm yelling at the top of my lungs, stating out loud, Mama, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I couldn't help you. I'm sorry that it wasn't me who was able to support you. And then I got a insight, a download from my spirit, from my energy, my inner child. I received a download and this would help me release it. What I received was It was never your responsibility to help your mother through this experience. Your mother transitioned because she was ready to go. It was always on her time and not on yours. It was always your mother's journey and it wasn't yours. Your mother transitioned when it was time for her to transition. So even if I wanted to help her in any capacity, it was still out of my hands. In that moment, that made me realize that I carried this strong notion, this strong savior complex that it was my fault. I took full responsibility for my mama's death. I took full responsibility. I blame myself for my mother's death. And this is something that I think that we all experience when someone dies, that someone that is close to us, we may feel like we have all the resources, we have all the education, we have all the knowledge about what they may be experiences. We have the alternative perspectives that they don't know about, and so we feel obligated. We feel responsible. We feel like, yo, like I know what you need help with. I know what you need support with. You need to do X and Y and Z. But you'll notice even in that whole understanding that they're going to make their decision however they choose to make their decision, because that is how they're supposed to leave. It don't matter what we think they should do. It's all about what they are innately spiritually guided to do. Let's just say we all have an expiration date. And so for me to try to prevent this expiration date from happening, who am I to do that? So even with the best attention, best intention of supporting someone that you love and you want to see them live longer, even with the greatest intention, we still have to let go, because then it gets into the ego, and the ego gets attached to this concept of being the savior. And so the ego will create the ambition to want to try to support and help whoever it is that you're trying to support and help. And don't get me wrong, this is not like a bad thing in terms of how the ego is moving and navigating. It's just that you have to understand that you are attached to this savior part of yourself, and that you think that if you can put Dr. Sabi in front of your mother or your partner or someone who's going through a death process, that will save them. And so we have to have the understanding and the acceptance that this person is going to pass regardless. They're going to transition regardless. And yes, if you can help, help, but also understand you can only do so much. So what I realized also in that moment was when that naturopathic doctor told me, look, I cannot help your mother unless she's willing to participate in her own self healing. That's what made me realize that when we're going around supporting people, it doesn't matter what we tell them. If they're not willing to support themselves and show up for themselves and participate in their own healing, they will never get into a space of healing themselves. So we can only become the people who spread the message, or the people who plant the seed for them and hope that they go back to that seed that we planted and they water it for themselves. But we cannot expect for them to make any radical changes if they don't feel inside of themselves that they wanted to do the internal work. That's what she was trying to share with me then, and I didn't understand the concept until now. We do not heal people. We do not save people. People have to heal and save themselves. We're just a facilitator. We hold the space. We are a catalyst. We are an example. But at the end of the day, there's no one that's going to save us. We have to save ourselves. We just support people and helping them save themselves. And so as I'm laying in this bed, crying my eyes out with this realization, I realized that I needed to let go of the guilt and the shame and the responsibility mindset that I was responsible for why she passed away. I need to let go of that attachment because that wasn't the truth. I looked at it as that was the truth. The truth is that it was my mama's expiration. This was her time to finally let go of the physical shell and go back into spirit. That was the truth. That is always the truth. As much as we don't understand it, as much as we want to deny it, as much as we don't want to accept it, that is the truth. We are here to have an experience and go back into the spirit, go back into where we originally come from, our true essence. And we have to have a better relationship of getting out of this human shell, getting out of this human concept of who and what we think we are, because we are not humans. We come into this existence as being a human, navigating as a human, having the mindset of a human. We are taught what it is to be a human, but we are not human. The essence of who we truly are is not human. And so we have to understand when it's time for a transition, we have to be able to let go of this facade, this mental construct that we have that's been created for us to have a human experience. So in that experience, I had to reframe my perception on my mother's death. And the way I reframed it was taking myself out of it, taking myself out of the equation, thinking that it was my responsibility. And it wasn't. It wasn't my responsibility. I took full responsibility. I acted as if every part of her experience was because of my lack of not doing. So this is actually what freed me from grieving. I had to reframe my perception. And I want to share that with you guys. If you're carrying grieving, if you're carrying this in your heart and you're struggling with trying to understand how to support yourself in this experience, ask yourself, what is your perception? How are you viewing this? How are you internalizing this? How are you seeing it for yourself? How are you personalizing it for yourself? Because if you're making it very personal, then you're attached to it. And if you're attached to it, it's going to create the suffering. I'm not saying this, put your hands down and don't do nothing. If you can, do what you can because this is someone that you loved and someone you will always love. So I'm not saying don't do anything. What I'm saying is don't become attached to the responsibility that whatever role that you're playing in this experience is 100% on you. And it's not. Okay. Okay. So I hope that in any shape or form or fashion that me sharing that with you guys has supported any aspect of what you're going through in terms of grieving. Um and so I just want to leave that message with you guys. The last bit of what I just shared was that get to a space where you can reframe it. Get to a space where you can start to see how much how much of your role is in this experience, and why do you feel like it's your role? Because, like I said, this is my mama. So my role as a son is to do whatever I got to do to support my mama, because that's my fucking mama, right? I think anybody would feel like that. And so I'm a validate that. But on the other side of it, I have to keep into consideration what we call this, right? What we call this experience is that we have as humans, spiritual beings having a human experience, godlike energy having a human experience. The process of birth, the process of having a child come into his existence is just as beautiful as a person exiting out of this world and going back into the spiritual world. I noticed that when we think about death, we don't think about it the same way we think about birth. Birth is all about the celebration. Oh, you have a new child. Oh, it's a newborn. It's a new reality. It's a rebirthing process. That's the same thing with death. It's a rebirth. It's a new experience. So the question would be is, how do you look at the transition of death? What is your mindset? What is your beliefs behind it? All right. So I'm gonna let you guys go on that note. Please, if this story has resonated, supported you in any way, I would love to hear how it has influenced you and impacted you. Please leave a comment below. Of course, I check all my messages, all my comments, and uh, this message was very intentional. So I really, really hope in my heart that it has influenced and supported at least one person. And on that note, you guys, I see you in the next video. Peace.